All right. So let's dive into this week's news, starting here in Indiana with a quick trip around the headlines in a segment I like to call Around the Corn. So, first, uh, Planned Parenthood in Indiana is at risk, citing a Supreme Court decision from last month that allowed South Carolina to exclude Planned Parenthood from its Medicaid program. Our Attorney General Todd Rokita wants to do the same here in Indiana, vacating a 12-year-old injunction on abortion provider state funding ban in Indiana, potentially cutting off the organization, which also provides birth control, cancer screenings, HIV preventions, STI infection testing and treatment, vaccinations, and wellness exams, trying to keep them from any state money. Also, in news relating to women's health care in Indiana, the Indiana Court of Appeals on Monday affirmed a ruling by a trial court judge upholding the state's near total abortion ban, specifically provisions relating to medical providers and potential exemptions. The underlying case here initially centered on the risk to the health of the mother and the rights of the providers, and delayed the implementation of the ban by roughly a year after the Indiana Supreme Court ruling in favor of the state's ban left it open for future challenges. The plaintiffs, represented by the ACLU, amended their complaint to narrow the focus. That amended version is the one that the Court of Appeals weighed in on Monday. There is, however, still a challenge ongoing regarding whether Indiana's ban violates its religious freedom law. Um, Also, really quick before we take a break here, I want to talk about another court case. Another appeals court sided with the mothers in an attendant care case. So, a federal appeals court this time affirmed a lower court's preliminary injunction allowing two Hoosier mothers to continue providing state reimbursed caregiving services to their medically fragile children. Responding to a nearly $1 billion projected Medicaid shortfall, as you guys may recall, state leaders with the Family and Social Services Administration made several changes in 2024 and halted a program that paid parents to be caregivers to their children with medically complex conditions. This program paid parents an hourly livable wage, but roughly 1,600 families were transitioned to another service that paid a per diem stipend at a far lower rate. So, two mothers sued and were eventually granted a preliminary injunction, which the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed this week. And I want to pause our headline cycle here really quick and look at those three cases. Josh, as an attorney, do any of those stand out to you? You're on mute, sir. There
Man,
we
what I
are.
said was just so good too. We'll never know what it was. Look, the two of them don't make any fucking sense together because the abortion ban does not allow a place like Planned Parenthood to perform abortions now, right? That's one of the whole parts of that abortion lawsuit. So part of it was medical providers suing and saying, basically only hospitals can perform these abortions.
Mhm.
And part of the court's ruling was, well, basically any exception that Indiana has, you're going to be in a hospital anyways, right? So you have one lawsuit saying, from a practical standpoint, you're not going to be able to have any abortions at Planned Parenthood. The other lawsuit is trying to argue that we need to defund Planned Parenthood because they perform abortions. That doesn't make any sense together. But it's because Attorney General Todd Rokita doesn't actually care about women getting healthcare services. He doesn't want to just prevent abortions. He wants basically women to go back to, I don't know, maybe the 1910s. That they were probably too progressive then. I don't know, maybe the 1800s, 1700s. I don't know where in time he would find it the best, but like this is just this ongoing attack on women, and Todd Rokita's taken it to the court, and that's what two of those three really are.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the insight there from the legal perspective. Now, Tracy, as a mother who has children with complex situations, not that kind of complex situations, but um, still, you have to deal with FSSA, I imagine, and go through the rigmarole with them. Is, is this encouraging, at least, that the court is siding with these mothers?
I'm not actually having to deal with that just yet. I am going to be soon, so that'll be fun. I Yes, that part is encouraging and I like that piece of it. I did want to I mean, as a parent of a teen of potential reproductive age, it's always fun to be a parent in Indiana. You always have to worry what happens if my kid gets raped. What happens, if I decide to luckily I'm close to Chicago, but what happens if things change a little bit and they arrest me when I come back over the border? Like yeah, it's a lot. And the other thing to keep in mind is that Planned Parenthood doesn't just provide reproductive services. Planned Parenthood also is one of the most prominent and one of the last remaining provider of trans services in Indiana. They aren't servicing teens or minors, but they do provide hormones and counseling, um, and all kinds of services to the trans community that a lot of other providers just are simply getting out of that game altogether. So, um,
Yeah, I mean, again, with our state's extreme abortion ban, Planned Parenthood can't perform that service. But like we listed, there are a lot of other things they do, and this policy that Rokita wants implemented would essentially make it impossible for them to do just about anything in the state. Uh, you know, uh, Medicaid funding is going to pay for a lot of those services, I imagine, and without that, you've got to figure any Planned Parenthood clinics still in the state would be in danger of shutting down, and that is their goal. Um, let's look at another story here. Hey, listen, generally bad stuff all week. Here's a little bit of good news. So, Indianapolis reverses course on the Fountain Square homeless camp that they were planning on shutting down. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. So, after weeks of sharp criticism, Indianapolis leaders have changed their approach to a prominent Fountain Square homeless camp and will allow residents to remain at the site until they are offered housing. The Office of Public Health and Safety announced on August 15th that residents who still live at or recently left the homeless camp along Leonard Street will be housed through Streets to Home Indy, a new city backed initiative to place more than 300 people to be living on the streets into apartments by next June. So, at each camp, the process is expected to take 4 to 6 weeks. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. They were going to close down this camp, and those folks weren't going to have anywhere to go because this Streets to Home Indie program was still ramping up. So, with this decision, Merkley, the public health and safety administrator there in Indianapolis, is in effect doing what the critics urged him to do during a town hall held days after his initial decision to close the camp. So instead of pushing people from one tent encampment to another, which is what would have happened, advocates for people who are homeless say service providers should offer people stable housing and case management. Derek, hey, look, something resembling good news.
Yeah, I mean, I had the pleasure of being one of your panelists on that episode. I think it's great. I mean, give people a chance. Sometimes
Yeah.
all you need is a hand to give you a chance, and they're seems like they're trying to do the right thing this time.
Yeah, and that was our one big thing that
Mhm.
that episode, and we talked about homelessness policy in great detail, and we talked about housing first initiatives and how they are controversial on the right. You know, the Trump administration, Braun, Rokita, these guys. all are punishment first, right? Incarceration first. But this housing first initiatives are number one, more effective, and two, actually cheaper in the long run. So good stuff there. Now, I do want to stay in Indianapolis, where we've talked frequently on this program about the dysfunction at the city county council, particularly among Democrats. Well, they are not alone. Republicans cannot capitalize on the Democratic dysfunction because they've got some of their own. And this week, Republicans on the council have chosen new leadership. Councilor Michael Paul Hart was in the position for less than a year, and during a caucus meeting this week, his fellow Republicans voted to remove him as minority leader. Hart represents a Southeast Side district, and he said fellow councilors told him that he was doing too much too fast. Republican councilors voted to reinstate Brian Mowry as minority leader. He had held that position for the past 4 years. Josh, you're not in Indianapolis, but you are just north of there. Any thoughts on that? You're on mute again, sir. There you are.
We're 0 for 2 today. The bigger thing to me, like the thing that look, they're in the minority there, the Republicans are, which I wish we could say about that everywhere on every, the group of politicians. So it's not going to make that huge of a difference. The thing that jumps out to me though is if two Democrats look at each other in a cross way, the headline on every news article is Dems in disarray. Republicans can't get their shit together, and we just like nobody says anything of it. And it goes to something that drives me nuts is just the double standard in the mainstream media, right? Like, I don't expect Fox News to cover stuff fairly, but the media that is supposed to be neutral jumps on any time two Democrats disagree on anything, as where Republicans, I mean, right now we're living through probably the most messy administration in presidential history at a minimum, right? And
I don't think that's a probable. I think that's a
yeah,
yes. Yeah.
it doesn't catch anybody's eye. And I think there's actually a reason behind this is Democrats still have standards.
Yeah.
And I think the media a lot of times feels like, hey, we can report on this, people will react and it'll make a change. We can report on anything about Republicans and it doesn't make a difference. I mean, was it last year when they literally, the guy that won the primary, the Republican that was literally in jail for murdering his wife? Like, there's literally nothing that's disqualifying for a Republican, but the media can cause a Democrat to have to step down, can cause a Democrat to, you know, be against another Democrat. And so when I hear stuff like that, like I'm not shocked that the Republican didn't get anything done, but I am forever annoyed that like if you hadn't brought that up, probably no media person in Indiana is even talking about it this week.
It was news to
Yeah,
me.
well, I did say that I will attribute that story to Mirror Indy. That's where it came from. So they at least talked about it in passing. I will say, in defense of media around here, anyway, regarding Indianapolis and their city county council in particular. I mean, the Republicans don't really have any power there, so it's a side note.
So I actually
When
just
they change people, yeah,
well,
go
I
ahead.
guess I guess my point is not so much an attack on the media, it's the fact that there's nothing's disqualifying for Republicans,
Yeah,
right? And so I think the media is reacting to the readers, right? Reacting to the voters. And so I think that's why the media focuses on it. I don't want to act like I'm, going right wing and just blaming the media for everything.
No,
I
but
actually think them
you
react.
have a point. It's not, and it's just it's the nature of the media environment we're in, where if what your job is to get people to read or engage with your content, you give them what they will react to. And Republicans are not reacting to the shocking things that their politicians are doing, but I don't, and Democrats do. And you're right about that. That bifurcation is there, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to continue to be a person that has some sort of moral center and expects my politicians to not do things like rape young children or murder people or say I can grab them by the whatever and walk down the street and nobody will care. Like, I'm glad that for me, if my politicians don't have any respect for my intelligence, I am offended by that. I think the question is that are all Republicans of that cohort? And I think the answer to that is no. I think there is room for more coverage of Republicans. It's just that these people aren't engaging on those platforms. And it goes back to something, Josh, you were talking about earlier, is how do we reach those people? Where are the people for whom the embarrassment of the Republicans or of their politicians doing and saying these embarrassing things does have an impact? They just can't admit it yet. Where can we find those people? I have yet to see where that channel is.
Yeah, that's very good points all around. And I do need to move on though. So let's look at a couple environmental stories really quick before we look deeper into a few more Indiana stories. So this one from Indiana Public Media, the EPA is cutting funding for a low income solar program, including more than $117 million for Indiana. This $7 billion Solar for All program was set up under the Biden administration and aimed to lower residents' energy bills and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Not friend of the pod, Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator, made the announcement on X on Thursday, saying the agency plans to follow the intent of the One Big Beautiful Bill. EPA no longer has the authority to administer the program or the appropriated funds to keep this boondoggle alive, said Zeldin. So, lower income Hoosiers are more likely to live in older, less energy efficient homes that use more power, and advocates said putting solar on these homes not only lowers their energy bills, but also reduces the need for more power plants, which all electric utilities, electric utility customers pay for. This funding cut comes at a time when the average Indiana resident's bill has gone up by $28 a month since last year. Related, they're building a huge Amazon data center up in north central Indiana, New Carlisle. And as we all know, these data centers are giant energy consumers. And NIPSCO, the public utility up there, will be having to provide a lot of power to this data center, and all of the other customers of NIPSCO are going to be on the hook, at least for part of it. Now, this data center, the Indiana Department of Environmental Management this week sent them a letter halting some of the work on this construction site. Excuse me, sorry, lost it. Stating that Amazon had an incomplete application that would affect over 9 acres of wetlands, and the unauthorized impact on the wetlands violated 2 Indiana codes prohibiting discharge, emission, or allowance of contaminants or waste causing pollution, and prohibits the disposal of inorganic or organic matter into Indiana's waters. Amazon has 30 days to resubmit plans for approval or risk denial of their application. Derek, how bad must the quality at this construction site be? How bad must their polluting be for the Department of Environmental Management under this administration to tell them, hey man, you're going too far?
It's got to be black sludge going into the wetlands for it to be that bad. They don't care about the PFAS chemicals or anything else, but it's just got to be. It's either black sludge going into it or, Prozac going into the water to calm everybody down.
I think we
Hear,
need a
hear me
road trip
out.
to go
That one
check it out.
might not be that bad of an idea.